could make it here with us. We have in the back just an announcement. The bookstore, the vendor for this year's author showcase, which is Third Space Action Lab. This is a Cleveland-based bookstore, Black-owned, and we encourage you to patronize the bookstore while you're here, and also to give them a shout out on social media with photos and all sorts of props that are so necessary and needed. So we have our next session up with Morgan Campbell and Coley Harvey. Morgan is the author of My Fighting Family, Borders and Bloodlines and Battles That Made Us. Wow. Sounds exciting. Sounds like family. The debut memoir, or this debut memoir from award-winning journalist Morgan Campbell. It's an incredible history of a family's battles across generations, a hilarious and emotional coming-of-age story, and a powerful reckoning with what it means to be Black in Canada, particularly when you have strong American roots. It follows Morgan's family's rocky path from the south side of Chicago to the suburbs of Toronto and back, exploring how history, heritage, race, sports, and music shaped his growing up Black and American in Canada. The Campbells and the Joneses. This was during a time when the two halves, the Campbells and Joneses, were at war. So that's enticing enough alone to, get you started. Morgan is an award-winning journalist, currently a senior contributor at CBC Sports, and a contributor to the New York Times and ESPN. For over 18 years, he worked at the Toronto Star and established himself as one of Canada's finest sports journalists, displaying both a range and depth of knowledge, finding original stories and telling them with flair and nuance. He covered sports as varied as boxing, baseball, and soccer. Morgan's best work highlighted where sports intersected with off-field issues such as race, culture, politics, and business. He's a graduate of Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. And with Morgan today, the moderator and interviewer is Coley Harvey, who is affiliated with ESPN as a reporter, and I'm sure that title carries many other responsibilities. So without further ado, let's get started. We'll have 20 minutes for interviewing and then 5 to 7 minutes for Q&A. All right, gentlemen, thank you.
All right, Bonnie, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Hello, NABJ. Yeah, thank you all for coming and listening to Morgan Campbell dissect this wonderful book. I had a pleasure of reading this book, I guess, just when it was coming out in December of 23, going into January of 24 when it actually debuted. And I've known Morgan for a while. I'm also an alum of Northwestern University. We weren't there together, but I've known Morgan for a while. As Morgan likes to say, we were the two Black guys essentially in the press box covering baseball, which is very uncommon, but also we're in Toronto, Canada, where it's probably even a little more uncommon. Yes. And so we've known each other since then. That was about 7 years or so ago. Even with that aside, my bias in that sense aside, this is one of the best books that I've read in a long time because of the storytelling, because of the description, because of the language, and because of that nexus of family, sports, music, and intergenerational history. So with that, we're going to go on and begin, and I really want to pose the very first question to you.
Let's go.
Your title. My Fighting Family, the Borders and Bloodlines, the Battles That Made Us. First of all, it's that word fighting.
Yes.
That action verb. Tell me about what this is about. What is this fighting about? Because I know that you're a big fan of the pugilistic art.
Yes.
But we're not talking about that kind of fighting.
No, and so the people that know me will not be surprised to read this book and find obscure references to boxing. But my family, I'll put it to you like this. Most people that read the book and they talk to me about the book, they say to me, your family's nothing like my family, especially if they're in Canada, like culturally they're coming from a completely different place. I say, your family's nothing like my family, but your family is exactly like my family. in the sense that a slight or a perceived slight can turn into a grudge that lasts for years, lasts for generations. And in my family, we would get into these big fights because we had a couple of people in the family, my mom's dad, my dad's mom, who you would find at the center of every fight. And if the fight didn't center them to begin with, they would get themselves into the middle of that fight. So they're common denominator in every fight, either starting it or finding an existing fight and making it worse. And every family has that person. And if you think about your family, you can think about that person. And if you're thinking about your family and you cannot think of who that person is,
you're blessed.
No, it might be you.
Oh, good point.
Beware.
Good point.
Check yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I know that in my family we certainly have had certain issues. We've had people that have resolved issues over the years.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like that's happened too often in your family.
We've reached a place where we have figured out that it's better to cooperate than to butt heads.
Yeah.
So thankfully there haven't been. And the thing is too, my dad's mom, my mom's dad, they were the big instigators. When they passed, there's no one to take up that mantle unless you really feel like it. But then my mom had to serve notice to her brothers and sisters. Like, I ain't interested in any of you doing what they did. So if you want to fight, you can be shadowboxing, you're fighting alone. So that's how it went.
How did this project come about for you? I know this is a 3 years long ordeal, so to speak, in terms of the writing of it. But ordeal in the sense that I know what it takes to write a book and I don't have a book myself, but I've seen the process from outside. Tell me about this project itself. How did it come together for you, and why did you want to focus on your family in this way?
A couple things. One, there was one summer when I was working at the Toronto Star and I was just bored. I was sort of in the middle of a constructive dismissal in the sense that management was purposefully mismatching me with jobs, trying to get me to get bored, frustrated, quit. I was going to quit on my terms, but I was bored. So in the summer, this is probably the summer of 2013, I just started taking a creative nonfiction class. And every week they would give you a topic, a prompt, and every week you would come back with a different essay. And a lot of these essays just wound up focusing on family just because. These were just the things that were on my mind, you know? So I wrote a few essays for that class, and I just literally left them alone for 5 or 6 years. And then when I had the opportunity to take a buyout from the Star, when they finally offered enough money in a buyout that it made sense to leave, I did that because I knew I wanted to write this book. So I took that year, finished the proposal, pitched the proposal, sold the book, got to work on the book.
That is a unique process. Well, one of the things I do want to ask you, just backing up a little bit, is we talk about your family.
Yes.
When I'm reading this, I'm interpreting that some of these are some really good and deep family stories.
Yes.
We all have family stories.
Yes.
But in some cases, you might consider these family secrets. You know, in some families you could consider this. Certain families might consider it that way.
Yeah.
I'm just curious the reaction that some of your family members who have been portrayed in this book, what have they said?
Now you're asking a different question.
I'm trying to get a little bit deeper there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put it to you like this. One, I did not ask permission from anyone in my family to write this book. Because if you ask permission, you're not going to get it. But it's like being in a job, right? You got to take the initiative. You wait for permission, you're not going to get it because somebody's just going to say no just for the sake of saying no, just because they can't try, right? So, but what I did do is, I issued sort of a disclaimer, a warning to my family. I said, hey, look, these are our stories, but these are my stories. These are our stories from my perspective. And so this is not the book any of the rest of you would have written. So as you read it, don't think of it as the book that you would have written. And the other thing I had to make very clear is that I'm not interested in relitigating old fights. So if you think this is like Pacquiao Mayweather 2 or whatever, it's not. Ain't gonna be no rematch. This is done. And I had to do that because you don't know who is gonna try to take the opportunity to dredge up one of these old fights. But my mom, she read it sort of later. And I didn't hear like rumors from other factions of the family. Because everyone has their faction, Team Claude and Team Mary, whatever. Some folks weren't happy with the way I portrayed Claude. That's my mom's dad. He was the pianist who got booked in Canada, which is how we wound up moving to Canada. But the point is, all those stories are true. And so you can try to gripe with the portrayal of the person, but if you know the person, you know those portrayals are true. So you can't gripe but so much. Mm-hmm. And so if I write Claude as a character that makes Claude's faction happy because he seems like a nice guy in this book, one, I have a very boring book. Mm-hmm. There's no heel in the book, no villain. Mm-hmm. Who keeps the plot moving? But two, they just wouldn't recognize the person, because no matter what you think of the man, like the people that knew him can read that book and recognize the man. Mm-hmm. And so that was the goal. And sometimes, egos get bruised, but bruises heal.
Yeah, speaking of your grandfather, your mom's dad, Claude Jones, he's such an influential piece of this book, mm-hmm. character in this book, but also he lived a life, man. He did a lot of things. Well, one of the things that he did is the song is the shoot.
Yes, it's in his Kiss.
It's in his Kiss.
He's playing piano on that song. Yes.
Tell me. I mean, you hear that song in movies. Yep. You see it in commercials all the time. While you're researching this book and trying to figure out the stories you want to tell about him, what was the most surprising thing that maybe you learned about him?
So, like, a lot of the stuff about, like, the songs that he played on, those weren't functions of research. That was stuff, my mom, and my mom knew, even sometimes more so than him, because he was a session musician too by day. And so a lot of these sessions he would play and he would just forget. It's just like, when we write for a newspaper, I remember the game story I wrote June 18th, 2009. No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, right.
So he doesn't remember all the sessions, but the ones that turn into hits, he remembers those. I'll recap sort of a family story, one of the things that underpins who we are, who these characters are. So the story that sort of got passed down in my family was that my grandfather was he wasn't young Claude Jones, he's about 10 years old, had just started piano lessons. His older sister, Edith, for those of you all from the south side of Chicago, she had just graduated from Fenger. Okay? And she wanted to go to college. Charles, you're from Chicago too?
Of course.
Okay. So they just graduated from Fenger. And so she just graduated from Fenger. He was still in grade school, had just started piano lessons. She wanted to go to college. She wanted to be a teacher or a librarian. He was in piano lessons. And so the parents were like, well, we can't afford both. And they said, we choose our son. He's gonna take piano lessons. We're not sending you to college. You can just go be a domestic, go work for some white people, clean their house. Because you're a woman, you don't need a career. And this was always how it was framed to me, was as a decision that was distinctly sexist. And that's it. And then one time, towards the end of my grandfather's life, I was at his house, he's in his office. He had all these, he's a photographer, one of his hobbies, and he had all these negatives, all these pictures. And he shows me this picture of his father in Marshall, Texas. So this is like 1910, something like that. Wow. His dad's a kid. They had just built a schoolhouse. Wow. And he's like, that's your great-grandfather. The guy next to him is Scott Joplin's nephew, Scott Joplin, the pianist. Wow. Right? And I was like, your dad knew Scott Joplin's nephew? He's like, heck yeah. He's like, and they all moved up to Chicago around the same time, so that nephew of Scott Joplin, his son, was the best man at my grandfather's wedding. So, said all that to say this, and this is the difference between memoir and biography, is that memoir is like you sort of taking things apart and putting them back together in a way that makes sense. So I started thinking about the decision to prioritize Claude's piano lessons over Edith's college in the context of a family that knew Scott Joplin, right? Or Scott Joplin's family. So on the one hand, you're thinking of like, Claude's parents don't just think of piano as something that kids do. It's not a hobby. They have seen, because of Homeboy's uncle, like what it can do for you. A humble black kid that comes from nothing. You master the piano, you can become something, right? And the other thing I learned later about my grandfather, we might have put it in the book, that he was a call baby. He was born in that amniotic sac, right? And the oldies, when you're born like that, that's an omen. They think you are special. So now I put all those pieces back together. So on the one hand, yes, it's a patently sexist decision. But on the other hand, his parents looking at it now, they have this baby that's born in the call, and they think he is blessed. And he's also good at piano. And they realize that, like, yes. And so for them, it made perfect sense. It's not just choosing the boy over the girl, but this is their chance. They think they hit the lotto, you know. And so, that was one of these things that, like, the family always framed the story one way, and it was just a throwaway comment, you know. Claude gave me one day, but it made all this other stuff make sense. So
now, you know, there's obviously a lot of music within your family. There's a lot of poetry, in my opinion, within this piece, within this entire book. And I know we've got time for just a couple more questions, but I want to read a quick passage just so that our audience here gets a flavor of what I'm talking about. Because I'm a nerd when it comes to reading books and articles. I'm a writer myself by nature, so I love when I see literary devices that pop up within certain writings. And I think, in my opinion, that all throughout your book there's that. So here's a passage, and I do want to provide the context. You know, Morgan, you lost your father when you were in high school, and this is a passage that is from around that time.
Yes,
and
so the chapter's called The Next Season. I went back to school because my father died right before football season started. So I took a week off of school, got yelled at by a coach for missing school. And I was like, Coach, my dad died. He's like, I don't care, you come to practice. Our team was not very good. But this chapter is called The Next Season. But go ahead.
So here we are. On the field that season, I had learned to channel my anger so it burned like a furnace instead of a wildfire. Inspired, I made plays. Angry, I made errors. I had a handful of games to pry a scholarship from a college team. I couldn't afford mistakes. From warm-ups through the final whistle, I existed in a bubble that sealed out everything unsettled about my life. I could blot out distractions and just play. But the end of every game meant seeing other players with their parents. The bubble burst and current circumstances flooded back in. Not just trying to continue without my dad, my anchor, my armor, but the burden his death dumped on my mom and the way all three of my living grandparents vanished. The problem wasn't just my dad's absence, but the presence of tension between my family's factions. That autumn, I grew used to losing, but I never adjusted to loss. I noticed that in addition to that section, the section where you meet your wife, technically for the second time, but when you meet your wife, it just seems like the prose hits that much in such a more real way. What is it about these defining moments in your life that you really had to pull out the language in a way that really touches? Because I got touched just reading that again. I've read that.
So I'm going to say two things. The second thing is specifically for the Northwestern people. But first thing is that, to write a memoir, it's different, like as a journalist, because you're used to writing about other people, and so much of it is about the interview process, and like moments like that, pulling them out of other people, but then writing about other people, you see how it plays, but you're not in that other person's shoes. So it's difficult to turn the lens on yourself and grow comfortable enough with your own vulnerability to make a memoir work. Like, if you are famous, you can be as vulnerable or not as vulnerable as you want to be, because you're famous, your fame's going to sell the book. But like for the rest of us who are just in it to tell the best story possible, that means being vulnerable, talking about the time you fell on your face, talking about the times you succeeded, but also the times you failed. So the line that you were talking to me about at the end of that sequence, I grew used to losing but never adjusted to loss, because it comes at the end of a section where I go into great detail about how bad my high school football team was. And if I did not have former teammates who were around to like verify this stuff, you will not believe me. When you read the book, I hope most of you do, you'll read this and say, there's no way this happened. It didn't happen. My team was really bad. So I was used to losing. We won one game in 2 years, right? But that sentence, I grew used to losing, but never adjusted to loss. That literary device is called what? Adrian, we were in class with Bob McClory, spring quarter 1999. Not to age anyone here, but you know.
Not to age.
It's called the Zuma, where you juxtapose two meanings of one word in the sentence, right? And Bob McClory in magazine writing, he would harp on us about Zumas, like use some Zumas. And like anytime, if he was reading to us, if he came across a Zuma, he'd be like, hey, Zuma, right? So thank Professor the late Professor Bob McClory, who gets a shout out in the acknowledgments for that. So there you go.
I know we're getting close, but I got one last question for you, and this is, you mentioned playing football in high school. His team might have been bad, but guess what? This man played football, Division I football, for a Big Ten program. I won't say a Big Ten power, but a Big Ten program.
I kept that bench nice and warm. Nice stadium.
Still, you're on the team, man. That does not matter. When it comes to football and track, which you also ran, who would Morgan Campbell be without that?
Oh, that's a good question. Because the truth is, as much as I think pro sports are an ugly, dangerous, exploitative business, I love football. Football is one of the dumbest things you can do. It is dangerous, and the better you get, the harder you get hit, the more you're gonna get hurt. But I love the sport, and like a lot of my closest relationships, people who are like my brothers now. You know, these are relationships that were formed 30 plus years ago, playing football, training for football. Like Gerald Conway, you remember, like I talk to him all the time, you know? And guys that like, I might not have talked to them in 10 years. Chris Rooney, Harold Blackman, whatever. They can text me out of the blue and say, hey, Mountie, I need X, Y, Z. And I got it. I can text them like, hey, Rooney, I need X, Y, Z. And I got it. And so, especially as me, I grew up with two sisters. I didn't have like brothers in the house, but like football gave me that sense of brotherhood. And I think it might actually be for you Northwestern people from the 90s, this might actually be the anniversary of the day that all-conference cornerback Chris Martin christened me the Mountie. And this is a nickname that has stuck with me. Like, it is people that went to Northwestern in the 90s, they see me, they're like, hey, Mountie, and everyone, yes, because I was from Canada, I was still on, I came down as a defensive back, I switched to wide receiver, but those first few days of camp, I was a cornerback, and I had a really good practice, and Chris was like, oh, here's this little Canadian guy putting people in handcuffs. He's like a Mountie, you're the Mountie, and that nick, he just came up with it in the moment, and it has stuck like all the way till now.
That's hilarious. That's really great.
So if there was no football, I would not be the Mountie. I would just
be the Mountie. Yeah. All right, Morgan. We really appreciate it. We're going to open it up to questions here in the audience. I have so many more I want to ask you too.
Well, if no one asks,
but yeah, we'll get to them when no one wants to ask. But please, are there any questions? When you have one, if you could, we have a mic over here. But we can also hear you. Just make sure you say who you are.
I know you can project.
And where you're from.
Charles Whitaker, Northwestern University. Morgan, the thing about memoir that always is interesting to me is verification and triangulation, because memories are so fallible and people in families have very different perspectives. How did you triangulate? And of the family members who've read it, you said some of them may not like it, but do they question the veracity of some of your accounts?
So the answer to the second question is no.
Oh, interesting.
Because some of these things are things that everyone witnessed. Everyone just witnesses it from a slightly different angle. But there's a really, not to give too many spoiler alerts, because I hope y'all go out and read this book, a really tense scene at my dad's last Christmas. My mom's dad is there. My mom's dad and my dad never got along, but my dad has just had cancer surgery. My mom's dad was not just a cancer survivor, he was like a spokesperson. Like you would see him on billboards. And everyone's thinking, all right, well, Claude's gonna be a grown-up here and say something to Pete. He never does the whole night, like studiously avoids him, right? And what I say in the book is that English, is a language, we borrow words from other languages all the time. And the word petty, we borrow from French, petit, right? And I said, was Claude that night, looking smaller than I had ever seen him, right? Now, if you're Team Claude, you might not like that. You might not have been there, but like any number of other people can say, that's what happened. And it looks a little bit different from every angle, but what everyone can agree on is the pettiness. And so in terms of, I did a lot of fact checking with my mom, with my aunts. In terms of like verifying though, and again, because fact checking is one thing, but like getting other people to affirm the thing you went through, that's something different. Because then, again, that's when you get into asking for permission, and that's when you get into people like trying to get you to write the book that they would write. And then so much of the other stuff is just based on like actual facts that you can verify, that it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, there wasn't a lot, again, because I had to respect that line between fact checking and asking permission and like inviting someone to co-author this book and get me to write the book that they wanted to write, if that makes sense.
Got time for maybe one more? Anybody else?
Your father or grandfather?
Claude was my mom's dad. So if you, music fans, like if you go listen to I'm So Proud, Curtis Mayfield, first notes you hear, that's Claude Jones. He's playing the Celeste. Last notes you hear, same thing, Claude Jones playing the Celeste. So,
Oh, there's one more.
it's Adrian. Shout it out, Adrian.
Adrian Harewood from Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. Maureen, you occupy this really interesting space because you straddle the border.
Yes.
Right? You're both American and you're also Canadian. And you're kind of invested in both cultures and you're kind of aware of the nuances of both cultures.
Yes.
What are some things that you think Canadians need to understand about Americans? What are some things that Americans
That is such a Canadian question. It's really broad.
What do Americans need to understand about Canadians that you think sometimes?
The first thing Canadians need to understand about Americans, first thing that Canadians need to understand, period, is that Canada is a suburb of the United States. And when you think of Canada as a suburb of the United States, everything makes sense in the sense that, Adrian, who's the mayor of Chicago? Who's the mayor of Chicago?
Brandon.
Adrienne, who's the mayor of Chicago?
Oh, that's Brandon.
Who is the mayor of Waukegan?
No clue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if I go to Waukegan, who's the mayor of Chicago? They're gonna say
Yeah.
Brandon Johnson. Do you see what I'm saying? So Canadians, stuff happens like when Kendrick versus Drake jumped off, and all the Canadians were like, oh, he's making fun of all of Canada. I'm like, I assure you, Kendrick does not care about all of Canada. Not Like Us is not about Canada. It's about Drake and his friends. You see what I'm saying? But this is what happens. Like when you live in a suburb, you know you're very plugged into what's happening in the big city. The big city does not care about us. So Canada has to understand that Canada is a suburb of the United States, and once Canadians accept that, like everything makes a lot more sense, and you don't have to start taking stuff so personally, right? Because the truth is, most Americans don't care, do not care. Like until Donald Trump started saying he wanted to annex Canada, no one thinks about Canada. Because even like when you get into reading the book, you'll understand like that my grandfather, he was the one that got booked in Toronto and started this whole process of us moving to Canada. This is a guy that was very good friends with Oscar Peterson, who's from Little Burgundy, Montreal. So on the one hand, he knew Canada existed, but then when these agents called him and said he wanted to come to Canada, he was like, hell no, why would I go all the way up there? He could have just called his friend and said, hey, what's Canada like? You know, but again, the setup renders it so that Americans don't think much about Canada. So that's the one thing, that's the main thing Canadians need to understand. That would make things go much more smoothly because Canadians would stop taking things so personally. Because Americans, for the most part, don't mean to insult you. They don't even know you're there. What do Americans need to know about Canadians?
You gotta make it a quick thought.
Oh, the Canadians are much more, what's the word I'm looking for, bellicose, truculent than the media in America gives them credit for. That's why when Donald Trump started sniffing around, Canadians who complained about Canada 364 days a year decided they were going to stand up for Canada, right? Because again, this is a country where the main sport involved bare-knuckle fistfights, where you're not even really meaningfully punished. Like any other sport, you touch ejection. Canada, we take our gloves off and smash each other in the face and say, look, you got to sit out for 5 minutes.
That's it.
But it speaks to just like a pugnacity that a lot of Canadians have, that most Americans only think of friendly Canadians. And those two qualities can coexist. Like to bring it back to the book, my mom is both of those people because my mom is very friendly. My mom will also knock you out.
And on that note,
Yeah, thanks so much, Maria.
we're gonna end that.
Coley,
It sounds like the book lives up to its name, My Fighting Family, Borders, Bloodlines, and The Battles That Made Us. So make sure you pick up a copy in the back, and thank you so much, Morgan and Coley, for this discussion. It's very intriguing, and I mean, you know, it's about family, so we can all learn, right? Thanks again. We'll take quick photos, and I have something for you, Morgan.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Let's give the finger to
Yes.
Carly.
Oh.
We got to hold the book.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing. There we go.
We had all of our little pictures together when we were both younger.
What is this
You're still young.
Northwestern thing?
This is
It's the Medill
Pride.
line.
Purple Pride.
And,
We're like
Purple
bees.
Pride.
Okay, so we want to present this outstanding book award to Morgan Campbell for his book and all of your hard work that's been involved. So here you are.
Thank you so much.
An outstanding.
Let's go. You hold the trophy. Yes. Here we go.
Don't come around you dressed.
Oh, there it is. We got you right there.
Thank you.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you. Take care. All right, there you go. Yeah, great job.
All right, we're gonna
I
quickly
appreciate you making-
transition and welcome Heather up.
For going the extra mile, because again, like I appreciate it.
Definitely worth it. More than worth it.
It's good.
Say it again. Cool.